We're going to begin off teaching this book of Imam Ghazali's view, and it's it's about the spiritual dimensions of fasting. But before we get into that, it's extremely important. Before studying a book, it's extremely important to know about that scholar. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ said in Musnad of Imam Ahmad, fathers are of three types. Okay, the one who gives birth to you, the one who weds you his daughter, he becomes your father-in-law, right? And the third one, he said, the one who teaches you. And this is why scholars and teachers, they're almost like spiritual fathers. And if you want to take maximum benefit, you need to obviously know who your father is spiritually, who you're taking from, the background and whatnot. Because this religion is ultimately all about respect, veneration as well. The more veneration you have for the scholars, for knowledge, the more you're going to benefit. And this is why the famous statement, our scholars have always taught us that religion is ultimately veneration. The more you venerate it, the more you're going to benefit. You know, the more you venerate the month of Ramadan, the more you're going to spiritually take. The more you venerate the Quran, the more you're going to benefit. Likewise with scholars and books and teachers as well. The famous Imam Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, Abu Hamid, you know, and if I'll be honest with you, right, I'm a big fan of his. Ghazali is just one person that the moment I came to know about him, I absolutely fell in love with him. You know, subhanallah, and I think he just relates to a lot of us. You know, there's people who write about spiritual problems. I'm struggling with this, I'm going through this. And sometimes you come across books as well that talk about it, you know, and sometimes you just think, God knows, have they even experienced it? Some people, tabarakallah, God just creates them for him. They're born in this world. The famous Hamid bin Umar, Hamid, we mentioned him. When he first picked up Ghazali's books, he turned to his teacher and goes, I don't even know what he's talking about. He goes, I don't understand what hasad is. How can you be jealous? The teacher turned around and goes, close it. For people like you, this book doesn't even apply to you. He was just so shocked. He goes, how can you have jealousy? He goes, I don't even know what that is. Can you explain it? He just said, close it. There's certain people it doesn't even apply for. But Hujjatul Islam, though, he experienced it. He went through all of those sicknesses. And he came out. So that's why I just think like it resonates home and it hits home, you know. Ghazali is telling you, I've been through this journey. I had these problems. And he started off, Imam Ghazali and his brother. He had a brother as well. Their father was quite poor, and he left them a bit of wealth. He was on his deathbed, he was. At that time, they were quite small. And his father had a friend of his. He entrusted the, tarbiyah and whatnot to his friend. They say regarding this father's friend, he was from like the people of the Tasawwuf as well. Spirituality and some good character as well. So he had taken the money, look after them until it ran out. Then when they got to about, certain age or so, he said, look, I've fulfilled my trust. Your father entrusted this, I've looked after you. The money's ran out, I'm poor as well. So he goes, the best option now is you lot just join a madrasa. Madrasas back then, They were supported like waqf, religious endowments, right? So a lot of students would go there because accommodation was provided for, eating and drinking and things like this. Ghazali even mentions later on, he goes, we didn't go there to seek knowledge. We just went there to fill our stomachs. Because no accommodation, nothing to eat and drink. He goes, we went there not for the sake of God, but God made sure that we did it for his sake at the end. So they just went there, and Imam Ghazali was extremely intelligent. God blessed him. Even in the Western world, they say from the four most intellectual minds ever in history that have come about Ghazali. He is one of the four. Even in the Kuffar world, let alone, the Islamic world, right? So, mashallah, he picked up quick, he did, right? And he drank knowledge, subhanallah. And then at a young age, then the teachers noticed as well his understanding and, love for knowledge as well. And then, like this, growing up as well, he surpassed a lot of his teachers he did. Imam Ghazali wrote a book on Usul al-Fiqh. When he showed it to his teacher, he goes, you buried me before I died. At least let me die and then publish it. But because his teacher was like a master in that science he was. But he goes, come on, you killed me off. SubhanAllah. So he was very intelligent, and in fiqh, usul al-fiqh, in the science of theology as well, he just became an absolute master. In the Shafi'i school, Imam Ghazali authored almost about 4-5 books or so. Until today, they're difficult. Scholars are even kind of find it a bit challenging. Usul al-Fiqh is written one of the best works he has. Then, Imam Ghazali as well, right? He wanted to write a book refuting philosophy. Greek philosophy was quite prevalent back then. Instead of writing a refutation on it, he goes, no, that's what I'm going to do. Why? Because people are going to turn around and say, who's this? We don't even know who he is. He goes, I'm going to write a book about philosophy until they know I'm someone who understands it. He wrote a book on philosophy. The people were like, we've never come across a better book than this. Then he wrote a refutation on it. Just unbelievable. The mind, right? And until today, they say philosophy, Ghazali struck it so much, right, is never been able to get back up after that. And he just, because I'm talking about from a knowledge point of view, some even say he was a mujtahid. Mujtahids are people that they don't need to follow fiqh of school. Shafi'i and Maliki, no. They go direct to the Quran and Sunnah and derive from there. We're talking about very high rank of knowledge. But then it came to a point, Nizam al-Mulk, I don't know if you've heard of him, right? A lot of you, I know, watch Turkish dramas here. So Nizam al-Mulk, right, he was from the men of God. He loved the people of the Tasawwuf and the scholars. He would spend so much on establishing these Sufi quarters, if you want to refer to them as, and scholars and madrasas. Even the Sultan one day actually said to him, why are you wasting your cash for? Why are you wasting your wealth for? He goes, I'm preparing for you men that will stand up the whole night. If they raise their hands, your enemies will be destroyed even before you send your armies out. La ilaha illallah. If only the sultans were like that now, right? But they're preparing disco halls now. La ilaha illallah. So Nizam al-Mulk found out about Ghazali, he did, and he said, look, come. At that time, the Nizamiya was like the most prestigious Islamic university on the face of the earth, you could say, right? He goes, look, he had heard a lot about him, so he called him. Ghazali was it. He had attained the rank of the highest scholar in his day and age. They say 300 turbaned ones. That's how they refer to him as. 300 turbaned ones would sit in front of him, let alone the thousands of students. So obviously the scholars would have their own type of dress code, right? So 300 of the big scholars would come sit in his classes, let alone the thousands of students. Ghazali said, I knew there was no one that could match me. Straight up. I knew there's no one here that if I got into an argument, I would absolutely, destroy him. And he knew, but I think it's that point where he, something internally was going on. He goes, every day I was sat there, I knew I've got more knowledge than everyone. I know better than them, very eloquent in the way he spoke, the way he taught. He goes, but every day I knew there was arrogance in my heart. And subhanAllah, Ghazali's brother was from the people of the Salafis. He was always telling him, he goes, look, check yourself. Are you sure you're always sitting up there? And ultimately, arrogance is something in the heart. You can't judge someone and say he's arrogant just the way he... there's certain things that the Prophet mentioned, right? There's certain things you can kind of judge a person might have arrogance, but ultimately it's in the heart, right? You could sit here with your head down, but you could think you're better than everyone else. That's arrogance. So it's not necessarily like this is why one of the Sahaba, when he saw the other one praying, right, he was praying like this. His chin was on his chest. He said, khushu' is not in your chin, it's in your heart. As in, you can pray like this, but you could still be thinking about the dunya. As in, it's not about necessarily how you stand. It's ultimately about the heart. So his brother kept on telling him, like, look, the way you're talking to people, he was very harsh, right? And when he got into an argument, it was quite bad, it was. And something kept on disturbing him. They mention a story, right? Allahu Alam, but it's interesting is Ghazali was praying with his brother once, right? And his brother, like I mentioned, was on the people who purified their hearts. When they finished the prayer off, his brother said, I smell haid, menses blood. And he looked at Ghazali at that time, right? And he said, yeah, I was thinking about fiqh masail related to haid. While he was praying, he was. So he got gush, he did, and he goes, what on earth are you doing? We're praying to God and you're thinking about fiqh still. As in, there's a time and place, right? So Ghazali knew what was going on here. He knew there was problems. Every day he's getting more arrogant. Day by day he was thinking about it, he was battling with it, he was fighting with it. Finally, one day he comes to class. He's about to give the class speech when God took away his speech. He was trying to actually talk, nothing was coming out. He goes, everyone started looking at me, talking to each other. He goes, he got up and went home. 3 days he was sat at home, nothing was coming out. He goes, is in those 3 days I said to myself, this is a lesson from God. He's taken away, because for him, speech was the most beloved thing, is what makes him a scholar. If he can't talk anymore, right, as in, so that's when he said to himself, okay, enough is enough. I'm getting worse day by day. How am I going to, he knew Nizam al-Mulk's not going to let him go, right? So he goes, okay, what's going to happen is I'm going to pretend I'm going to, but not pretend, but I'm going to tell him I'm going to Hajj. I'm not going to come back. So 3 days later, a speech came back. He went and gave his class. Within that time, he was preparing, So he told them he's going to Hajj, packed his bags. That was it. Ghazali disappeared after that. He goes, I'm in one extreme. The only way I'm going to cure myself and get myself better is to go to another extreme, right? That's exactly what he did. The first thing he did when he went, he took his turban off, he took his... imagine, right? He was one of the most affluent people in his day and age as well. Nizam al-Mulk personally paying him. So he's got a salary of, tabarakallah, mashallah, the finest clothes, the finest turbans as well. The first thing is, the problem is not, obviously, it's not about the clothes a person wears, right? But if you end up worshipping them and you're all about clothes and the way you look, right, that's where the problem is. Ghazali, no question of that, that is what it is, right? The scholar. And that's why people ultimately gave him that love and time, right? So the first thing he had to do, he took his turban off, he took his jubba off and wore, beggars. Basically, he found a beggar, he did, and exchanged. He goes, give me your torn clothes, standard hat, and then swapped. And then he went on a long, Imam Ghazali after that, radiallahu anhu, went on a long journey then. The same Ghazali that was accustomed to thousands of people in his classes and kissing his hands and getting things for him, now he was completely by himself. He was radiallahu anhu, and he spent almost a decade or so. And love of authority, fame or authority, this is the biggest spiritual barrier between a person and God. If you love to be famous, you love to be known, this is the biggest spiritual barrier. The love of it, wanting to be known, right? Ghazali knew he had that. That's how he became Ghazali. The whole world at that time knew Ghazali. He's written these books. This is what he does, right? So he just buried himself and just disappeared after that. He went to Palestine for a time, Damascus, the famous Umayyad Masjid. It's the most famous masjid in Damascus. It was actually a church before pre-Islamic times. Then after conquering, they turned it into a masjid. Even the Sahaba taught there as well. The blessed head of the Prophet Yahya is buried there as well. Alayhi salam. And Ghazali went there and he decides to be the janitor, caretaker of the masjid. La ilaha illallah. That's what you call breaking nafs, right? From where he was, people constantly serving him, now to get down and do the dirty work, And Ghazali went like this. It's known, those of you that went to Damascus as well, the masjids there. And the famous minaret, Ghazali spent countless nights there, worshipping God and writing his books there. And one day, so this masjid, even now, it's there still, alhamdulillah, they have not destroyed or anything. So the scholars were all sat there, and one day a man comes asked him a fiqh question. None of the scholars had an answer. Ghazali is obviously rushing away, right? The courtyard of the masjid. He could hear the discussion. So they go, we don't know. The guy comes out, Ghazali goes, was this your question? He said, yeah. He goes, answers this. The guy said, you're the janitor of the masjid and you're giving fatwa. So he was like, he went back and told the scholars, he goes, what type of caretaker have you got? None of you know the answer, and he's giving fatwas out there. When they heard the answer, one of them knew. Only someone like Imam Ghazali could have given that type of answer. They went back to look for him. He had packed his bags. He had gone again. Because he goes, no more. I'm running away from people. And it's in this time Imam Ghazali authored his most famous work, Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of the religious sciences. And this is one of the greatest books in the history of Islamic literature. It's actually 40 books. So he split the book in 4 parts he has. So it's La ilaha illallah. So it's 4 parts, and each part is 10 books. So in total is 40 books it is. And radiyallahu anhu, that's where he compiled this, and he compiled a lot of his other books then. And then about 10 years later, he was told to go back to Naysabur, where he comes from. And then he went, because obviously he's got wife and children. So 10 years, he just disappeared. Finally, when he got told spiritually to go back, he went back home then, and then he started teaching there. They tried to get him to teach in the university again, but he kind of taught for a short time, and then after that he just focused on teaching people purification of the heart, radiyallahu anhu, until he passed away. Imam Ghazali didn't have any boys. He just had girls. That's why his lineage after that kind of just died out, because your lineage only passes on through boys, it does. As for the girls, obviously, they take on new lineages. So, radiyallahu anhu, also regarding some of, so we're going to be focusing on one of the books from that great work of his, Revival of the Religious Sciences. There's just a couple of things regarding Ghazali as well, radiyallahu anhu. Imam Abul Hassan, radiyallahu anhu, he said he saw a dream in which he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Palestine, Baytul Maqdis. Jesus, son of Mary, and Moses was with him there. Abul Hassan, radiyallahu anhu, he said the prophets were there, the scholars were there. Moses turns around, says to the Prophet ﷺ, you mentioned that the scholars of your nation are like the prophets of Bani Israel, where they come from, right? So he goes, bring forth one of these scholars. The Prophet said, is Abu Hamid there? Ghazali's name, right? He goes, is Ghazali there? Imam Ghazali got up. Moses said to him, at that time, Sayyidina Naam. He said to him, tell me, introduce yourself. He goes, I'm Abu Hamid, Muhammad, ibn Muhammad, ibn Muhammad, ibn Ahmad Ghazali. Moses said to the Prophet, Otto, he's a scholar. I just asked him what his name was. He ended up giving me his kunya, his name, his dad's name, his granddad's name, his great-granddad's name. Ghazali didn't comment back. He looked at the Prophet and goes, Ya Rasulullah, do you want me to answer back? He goes, answer him. He goes, when God asked you, what's that in your right hand in the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to him, what's in your right hand? He goes, what was your answer? He goes, قَالَ هِيَ عَصَايَ أَتَوَكَّلُ عَلَيْهَا وَأَهَشُّ بِهَا عَلَى غَنَمِي وَلِيهَا مَآرِبْ أُخْرَى. He goes, God didn't ask you that. You could have just said, it's my staff. You said, it's my staff. I beat down fodder from the goats. I do many other things with it. He goes, how come? He goes, God didn't ask you what you do with it. He said, what's that in your hand? And then Moses started laughing, right? He goes, the way you wanted to long out your conversation with God, I know I'm standing before the prophets as well. I want to take a bit of time and enjoy it as well. He started laughing and the Prophet laughing as well. He goes, did I not tell you? The scholars of my nation are like the prophets from your nation. He goes, yeah. SubhanAllah, that's a great Imam Ghazali. Was just one more, quite short for time. One of the great Maliki scholars, he said, Imam Arabi scholars of Newa, Ibn Asakir mentions this in his book. He goes, this Abul Fath Amir, radiallahu anhu, he goes, I entered into the Masjid of Makkah, Masjid al-Haram. He goes, I was sat there and I ended up falling asleep. He goes, I fell asleep and what I noticed is the Prophet ﷺ was sat there and all of the scholars, Imam Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Ahmad, all of them are there. They all got books in their hands. One by one, they're going to the Prophet ﷺ, showing them whatever they've done right. Abu Hanifa, the Hanafi fiqh books he was showing, recited it to him, the Prophet was happy with him, sat next to him. Shafi'i came, sat next to him. Malik came, they all read their books and said, he goes, like this, everyone that was coming with their books, all of the scholars. He goes, then the person of bid'ah had come. He wanted to recite his book to the Prophet ﷺ. One of the companions got him and his book, kicked him out. He goes, then when everyone had completed it off, I was the lost one. He goes, so I noticed they all read their books, it was my turn. He goes, I came with Ghazali's book from the revival Ihya. He goes, I read it to the Prophet ﷺ and the Prophet ﷺ was extremely happy. And he goes, I felt he was more happy than anyone else did. He goes, when I woke up, that's when I was certain that the Prophet ﷺ was happy with Ghazali and his books. Radiallahu anhu. Habib Umar often mentions as well that the ulama, there's two types. Ulama ad-dunya and the scholars of the hereafter. And he said the scholars of the hereafter, how you can tell that they're from the scholars of the hereafter is they love Ghazali's books. And they have a strong attachment to his books. And the Alawi scholars, Habib Umar, Habib Ali Abu Bakr and people like this, their tradition is one which is based on the Ghazali books. And I heard this from Habiba did. He was getting it was a private class where someone had completed of the Ihya at that time. And he said in the time of Habib Abdurrahman al-Saqaf, the famous Saqaf, the Alawis had got together at that time and said it's time to codify the tariqah, the spiritual path. Let us all get together and write a book to codify the manhaj. He goes, they had actually started. Abdul Rahman al-Saggaf, he had actually started writing something down. The Ba'alawi tariqah consists of this, and this. He goes, while he started writing it down, in those days, the first copy of the Ihya had come. Obviously, back then, it was difficult for books to get around right. He goes, that's when the first copy of the Ihya had come. He goes, when Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Saqaf looked at it, he said, Khalas, we don't need nothing after this. This is the Ba'alawi tariqah. Ghazali's book, Ihya. And Habib said that the Ba'alawi giants found that Ihya contained it all. And they put more light into it and more barakah into it, and they adopted that. And that's why Ghazali's books are very powerful. And Darus, who was the great-great-grandson of Saqaf, the famous Darus al-Akbar, they refer to him as, his connection with the Ihya was so strong, he would say, Bakhin, 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 glad tidings to the one who recites the Ihya, or even hears it. And in another one, he said, may God forgive the one who recites it. And he would finish it off. He would recite one book a day. Every 40 days he would complete it off. Because it's 40 books, right? He would do one book a day every 40 days. Even until today, the Qubbatul Darus in Tarim, where he's buried, every Monday they sit there and they do a book. Even now, after his death, they go to his grave and they recite it as well. And Ghazali's Ihya, he said, take from me. I'm telling you, Darus, right? He said, Ushhidullah, I bear witness and I testify, the one who constantly looks at Ghazali's Ihya, he's from the rightly guided. Every day you're going over it, or you're learning from it, going through it. Ghazali's books are they're extremely powerful books. And one of the great Alawi spiritual giants said that even if a kafir were to look at the Ihya and he would contemplate it, but the barakah of that, he would not pass away except that he says La ilaha illallah. That's the barakah of Imam Ghazali's books. Abul Abbas al-Mursi, the teacher of Ibn Ata'illah Secondary, he said, I bear witness that Imam Ghazali attained Siddiqiyatul Kubra, the highest spiritual station that anyone can attain. Obviously not as high as the prophets, but after that, he goes, I bear witness Ghazali's day. Abul Hasan radiyallahu anhu, he said to his companions, he goes, if you want your du'as to be answered, ask God by virtue of him. Your du'as will be answered. So inshallah, on that note, when you learn sacred knowledge, obviously you're meant to act upon it. So we'll try to keep these classes on time, we will. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by virtue of Imam Ghazali, he allows us to benefit from his books, make us from the people who recite the Ihya at all times, purify our hearts, minds, bodies and souls, grant us many openings in these days and nights, forgives us, purifies us, forgives our mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, teachers, students, loved ones, all those who are connected, and make us from the people who attained the special gaze of Imam Ghazali and the Salihin. على كل نية صالحة خيرات الدنيا العافية من هو سيد الزمان كتب الزمان في خير الأفعال وسيل الفاتحة إلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد الفاتحة.